The quest for cinnamon, this deceptively simple bark, quite literally set off an age of global exploration, funded wars, shaped empires, and irrevocably altered the course of human history, becoming a prize so valuable it was once worth more than gold. For centuries, before the compass led ships across vast oceans, cinnamon was a spice shrouded in absolute mystery, its origins fiercely guarded secrets whispered only among a select few. Imagine a world where a sprinkle of bark could buy you a kingdom, a world where emperors adorned their funeral pyres not with jewels, but with this aromatic treasure. Ancient Egypt relied on it for embalming rituals, transforming it from a mere fragrance into an essential component of their afterlife journey. The Romans, with their insatiable appetite for luxury, burned vast quantities as an offering to their gods and for the exquisite scent it imparted to their feasts and homes. Pliny the Elder, the celebrated Roman naturalist, recorded that 80 pounds of cinnamon was considered a king's ransom, a fortune almost beyond comprehension. He even noted a pound of cinnamon was equivalent in value to 15 pounds of silver. This wasn't just a spice, it was currency, a symbol of immense power, status, and divine favor, whispered about in hushed tones, its true source hidden behind a veil of fantastical tales and deliberate misdirection. So profound was its value that it became the ultimate prize, fueling a desperate scramble for its source that would eventually drive men to sail into the unknown, battling treacherous seas, foreign armies, and each other, all for a sliver of this fragrant bark. This wasn't merely about flavor. It was about control, about wealth unimaginable, about claiming the ultimate status symbol from a world still largely uncharted. The narratives spun around its origin were not accidental. They were elaborate, carefully constructed fables designed to protect a staggering monopoly. Arab traders, masterful navigators of both desert and sea, were the original guardians of this secret. They traversed arduous land routes, then perilous sea lanes, bringing cinnamon from its hidden homes in the east to the eager markets of the Mediterranean. To inflate its value further, and to deter any unwelcome curiosity, they concocted wild tales of its harvest. Picture this: colossal birds the size of eagles building nests on unreachable mountain peaks, crafting them from cinnamon sticks. To collect this precious bounty, ingenious methods were supposedly required, like luring these mythical birds with large pieces of ox meat, which they would carry back to their nests, causing them to collapse under the weight, spilling their cinnamon treasures down to the valleys where eager collectors waited. Or perhaps, as other stories claimed, cinnamon grew in deadly swamps, guarded by venomous snakes and ferocious beasts, harvested only by the bravest of men who endured unimaginable perils. These stories, fantastic as they were, served their purpose. They elevated cinnamon to a near-mythical status, justifying its astronomical price, and making the common consumer believe that every speck carried with it an epic struggle. The truth, however, was far less dramatic in its harvest, but infinitely more significant. Cinnamon, specifically Cinnamomum verum, or true cinnamon, originated on the tropical island of Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka. This island, a verdant paradise kissed by the Indian Ocean, offered the ideal climate and soil for this particular laurel tree to flourish. For millennia, the indigenous people of Ceylon, the Sinhalese, had known its secrets, cultivating and harvesting its aromatic inner bark. They knew the precise art of peeling back the layers, allowing the bark to dry and curl into those familiar quills we recognize today. But their world was largely self-contained, their knowledge a quiet ancestral wisdom. The true explosion of cinnamon's influence began not on Ceylon, but thousands of miles away in the bustling markets of the ancient world. The demand came from the West, a craving for exotic flavors and powerful aromatics that transcended mere culinary desire. It was about medicine, about perfume, about status, about a mysterious power believed to reside within the bark itself. The Roman Empire, in particular, became utterly enthralled. Their feasts were perfumed with it, their wines spiced, their medicines infused. The more they consumed, the higher the prices soared, and the deeper the mystery surrounding its source became. By the early medieval period, the flow of cinnamon into Europe was firmly controlled by a complex network of intermediaries. Arab merchants from the Arabian Peninsula were the undisputed kings of the spice trade. They purchased cinnamon from its origin points, navigated the Indian Ocean, then transported it overland through the Arabian deserts and Levant, eventually selling it to Italian merchants in the port cities of the Mediterranean, Venice and Genoa chief among them. These Italian city-states, positioned as the gateway to Europe, became immensely wealthy on the back of this trade. Venice, in particular, grew into an economic powerhouse, its grand canals and magnificent palaces built on the profits from spices like cinnamon. The Venetians then distributed the precious cargo across Europe, commanding exorbitant prices at every step of the journey. Every single transaction, every leg of the trip added to the final cost, making cinnamon an item reserved only for the absolute wealthiest and most powerful. This tight control, this carefully orchestrated monopoly, frustrated the emerging monarchies of Western Europe. They saw their wealth draining into the coffers of Italian merchants and Arab middlemen, and they yearned for a direct route, a way to bypass these gatekeepers and claim the astronomical profits for themselves. This yearning for direct access wasn't just about economic gain. It was intertwined with the emerging spirit of exploration, technological advancements in shipbuilding, and a powerful sense of national ambition. The 15th century dawned with a fierce competition among European powers, Portugal and Spain at the forefront, to find new trade routes to the fabled Indies, the source of all these coveted spices. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 further intensified this drive, as it disrupted traditional overland routes, making the sea an even more attractive, if terrifying, alternative. It was no longer just about buying cinnamon, it was about owning cinnamon. The very idea of sailing around Africa, an uncharted continent of myth and danger, would have been preposterous just a generation earlier. But the allure of unfathomable wealth, the promise of direct access to the source of spices like cinnamon, pepper, and cloves, fueled an unprecedented wave of maritime innovation and audacious voyages. This was the moment where cinnamon, that quiet bark, began to truly launch ships, not just metaphorically, but literally. The Portuguese, under the visionary leadership of figures like Prince Henry the Navigator, began a systematic exploration of the African coast, pushing further south with each expedition. Their goal was clear: find a sea route to India, break the Arab-Venetian monopoly, and claim the spice trade for Portugal. In 1498, after years of incremental progress and unimaginable hardship, Vasco da Gama finally rounded the Cape of Good Hope and reached Calicut, India. This was a monumental achievement, a direct sea link from Europe to the East, bypassing centuries of established trade networks. The world would never be the same. The Portuguese had opened the door, not just to pepper and ginger, but to the ultimate prize, the island of Ceylon, the very home of true cinnamon. It wasn't long before the Portuguese turned their attention to Ceylon. In 1505, a Portuguese fleet led by Lorenzo de Almeida stumbled upon the island after being blown off course. What they found was a land rich beyond imagining, not just with cinnamon, but with other valuable spices and resources. They quickly realized the strategic importance of this discovery. The island was divided into several kingdoms, making it vulnerable to external influence. The Portuguese, with their superior weaponry and naval power, wasted no time. They established trade agreements, then military alliances, and eventually, through a series of shrewd political maneuvers and outright brutal conquests, they asserted their dominance over the coastal regions of Ceylon. They built formidable forts, like the one in Colombo, turning the island into a critical stronghold in their burgeoning global empire. The Portuguese control of Ceylon was absolute and ruthless. They weren't just trading, they were colonizing. They forced the indigenous Sinhalese to harvest cinnamon for them, often under horrific conditions, threatening severe punishments for any resistance or failure to meet quotas. The ancient system of cinnamon gathering, once a revered practice, was transformed into a forced labor regime, a relentless engine of extraction for European profit. This wasn't merely an economic venture, it was an exercise in pure power. The Portuguese established a complete monopoly, controlling the entire process from harvest to export, ensuring that every quill of cinnamon that left Ceylon passed through their hands, destined for European markets where it still fetched incredible prices. The human cost was immense. Generations of Sinhalese people were subjugated, their lives dictated by the insatiable European demand for this aromatic bark. Entire villages were uprooted, ancient traditions crushed, all for the sake of a spice. The Portuguese monopoly, however, was not destined to last. As the 16th century gave way to the 17th, a new naval power emerged from the north. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, Verenigd Oost-Indische Company, was a formidable force, essentially a corporation with the power to wage war, sign treaties, and establish colonies. They eyed the Portuguese spice empire with covetous ambition, particularly the immensely profitable cinnamon trade. The ensuing struggle was a brutal, protracted affair, a series of naval battles and land sieges that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Asia. The Dutch, with their superior organization, financial might, and a relentless pursuit of profit, systematically chipped away at the Portuguese holdings. One by one, Portuguese forts and trading posts fell. By the mid-17th century, after decades of fierce fighting and significant bloodshed, the Dutch had ousted the Portuguese from Ceylon. They captured Colombo in 1656, ending a century and a half of Portuguese rule. This marked a significant turning point in the history of cinnamon. The Dutch, having learned from the Portuguese, perfected the art of colonial exploitation. They didn't just want cinnamon, they wanted complete, unassailable control over its production. Their system was even more efficient and, in many ways, more oppressive than their predecessors. The VOC enforced a strict monopoly, not only over cinnamon, but over other valuable resources of the island. They meticulously mapped cinnamon forests, implemented even stricter quotas for the Sinhalese harvesters, and brutally punished any attempts at smuggling or independent trade. Under Dutch rule, the cinnamon industry became a model of colonial efficiency and exploitation. The VOC maintained a massive workforce dedicated solely to harvesting and processing cinnamon. They even experimented with cultivating cinnamon, though wild cinnamon remained the primary source. The Dutch were so zealous in protecting their monopoly that they would regularly destroy surplus cinnamon to keep prices artificially high in Europe. Imagine that! Perfectly good cinnamon burned or dumped into the sea simply to maintain its scarcity and astronomical value in distant markets. This was a direct, calculated strategy born out of pure economic ruthlessness. They built a powerful infrastructure of forts, warehouses, and administrative centers to manage this vast operation. Ceylon, under Dutch control, became almost synonymous with cinnamon, a verdant island dedicated to supplying Europe's insatiable demand for this single precious bark. The lives of the indigenous people were further entwined and often crushed by this relentless pursuit of profit. It makes you wonder what other everyday items have such a violent, transformative past. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What food history would you like us to explore next? The Dutch monopoly, though incredibly powerful for a time, eventually faced its own challenges. The late 18th century saw the decline of the Dutch East India Company, weakened by corruption, mismanagement, and the rising power of a new global hegemon, the British Empire. During the Napoleonic Wars, as the Netherlands fell under French influence, the British seized many Dutch colonies, including Ceylon. In 1796, the British took control of the island, initially bringing it under the East India Company and later directly under the Crown. This transition marked another significant chapter in cinnamon's journey. The British continued the cinnamon trade, but their approach began to shift. While still colonial masters, they recognized the need for greater efficiency and stability. They inherited a well-established, albeit brutal system of cinnamon harvesting and processing. However, the British also began to systematically cultivate cinnamon on plantations rather than relying solely on wild harvests. This was a pivotal change. Plantation cultivation meant a more consistent supply, potentially lowering costs and making cinnamon more accessible. They also experimented with growing cinnamon in other parts of their vast empire, further diversifying the supply. This push towards cultivation and broader distribution gradually eroded the mystique and extreme scarcity that had defined cinnamon for millennia. As the 19th century progressed, several factors converged to fundamentally alter cinnamon's place in the world. The rise of industrialization, improved transportation, and new agricultural techniques made spices, once rare luxuries, increasingly common. The advent of steamships dramatically cut travel times and costs, making global trade more efficient than ever before. Simultaneously, other varieties of cinnamon, particularly cassia, began to enter the market in larger quantities. Cassia, while sharing a similar flavor profile, is generally coarser, stronger, and less refined than true Ceylon cinnamon. It's also significantly cheaper to produce, grown primarily in China, Indonesia, and Vietnam. The influx of cassia, often marketed simply as cinnamon, further diluted the market for the expensive true cinnamon from Ceylon. This shift meant that cinnamon, the bark that had once launched 1,000 ships and built empires, slowly began its transformation from a king's ransom to a kitchen staple. Its exorbitant price became a distant memory. No longer was it exclusively for the elite, it was now within reach of the common household. This demystification, while a boon for consumers, was a significant blow to the economies that had relied so heavily on its monopoly. The intense competition and the flood of cheaper alternatives meant that the unimaginable profits of centuries past were gone forever. The story of cinnamon is a poignant reminder of how economic forces, geopolitical shifts, and changing consumer habits can fundamentally alter the fate of even the most precious commodities. Today, cinnamon is ubiquitous. It graces our breakfast pastries, flavors our lattes, perfumes our desserts, and often finds its way into savory dishes. Most of what consumers in North America and Europe encounter as cinnamon in their supermarkets is actually cassia. True Ceylon cinnamon, with its delicate, sweet, and complex flavor, is still prized by chefs and discerning consumers, but it occupies a much smaller niche market. It's softer, more brittle, and has a lighter color compared to the hard, reddish-brown quills of cassia. The health benefits attributed to cinnamon, from blood sugar regulation to antioxidant properties, continue to be studied, giving this ancient spice a new lease on life in the wellness industry. Yet, as we sprinkle cinnamon onto our morning oatmeal, few of us pause to consider the immense, tumultuous journey it has taken. This humble bark, a simple product of nature, was once an engine of global change. It propelled explorers across uncharted oceans, funded colossal trading companies, ignited brutal wars, and redrew the maps of continents. The relentless pursuit of this aroma, this flavor, this symbol of status, led to the enslavement of entire populations, the rise and fall of colonial powers, and the forging of global trade routes that persist to this day. The human cost, from the forced labor under Portuguese and Dutch rule to the economic dislocations caused by shifting markets, is a somber backdrop to its fragrant history. From the mythical tales of cinnamon birds to the ruthless efficiency of colonial plantations, its story is a microcosm of human ambition, greed, and ingenuity. It tells us about the lengths to which humanity will go for perceived value, about the unintended consequences of global trade, and the profound, often violent impact that seemingly innocuous goods can have on the world. It's a silent witness to centuries of history, a quiet reminder that even the simplest ingredients on our spice rack have epic tales to tell, stories of adventure, conflict, and transformation. To think this common kitchen staple once ignited wars and redrew global maps, it's a testament to the quiet power of ingredients. If you found this journey as captivating as I did, perhaps share it with someone who appreciates a good story or simply wants to know the real history behind their morning toast. It helps us keep uncovering these incredible sagas. Every pinch of cinnamon today carries with it the echo of those 1,000 ships, the cries of empires, and the lingering scent of a world irrevocably changed by one extraordinary bark.